So I've got my 3-wire shapes, and I'm just going to lightly plenish this the whole length. So I do all 3, and you can see that I haven't killed it. I've just lightly plenished it, and for curiosity's sake, it's 1.1, so I've only plenished it 1/10 of a millimeter. Now I've got this set up for soldering, and you want your hammer marks facing up, because that way you know the back of it is flat, and you need to adjust your wires so that they're sitting down against your back piece. Now I've kind of ignored my lines, and I just lined the claws up so that they were more aesthetic. The only one that's critical is this one here in the bottom, where it needs to fit inside that little curve. So just make it aesthetic. Like I said, I've pretty much ignored my lines. My 5mm line is all the way up there, but it's impossible for me to get there using the same curve as the other ones. So this is what I'm going with. So make sure that the wires touch, flux, and lay a piece of hard solder at each point where it touches. Stir up your flux, always, and flux the area where the wire touches, flux the wire. Do all of them, because we're basically going to be soldering all 3 of these at the same time. Hard solder. You can see I have my solder on the outside of the curve, and these bits of solder are about 5mm long. And what I'm going to do is warm this up with my torch and then push the solder into place. And when the solder flows, I'm going to touch it with my solder pick just to make sure that it's all the way down against the base. So just warm it up in the beginning, make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. And you can see that the flux dried out almost immediately, and it's good. So I'm going to just concentrate my flame on one at a time. So I'm going to start on this one. And I'm just circling, because the majority of the heat needs to be on the base. So there, our flux has gone clear. And the solder will flow. There. So I'm just touching it to make sure that it's against the bottom. I'll switch to this one. Same thing. I just turned the heat up a little bit. Now watch, if there's part of it that's turning bright red, shift your heat, because you don't want to melt these tips. So that's that. Now we'll quench it and pickle it. So once you get your setting out of the pickle, have a look, make sure that the solder ran all the way along each wire. Now I'm going to do a double setting for this. I'm going to put a jump ring on the top so that you can run a chain through it. So I'll just solder that on there. But I'm going to do a double setup, kind of a little hairpin thing, so that I can just push this into my hinged ring so that it basically has a friction fitting so that this will either be a ring or a pendant. So you could just slip it out of the ring and use it as a pendant. So I'm just going to bend my wire, the smallest part. This is about 60 mil long. Yeah. So grab it roughly in the middle, make as tight a bend as you can, and because we want it closer together, it's basically going to be 2 millimeters apart. Take your parallel jaw pliers, just give it a bit of a squeeze. And then we want a little clip, so we want this sticking up 90 degrees so that we can pull it, get a fingernail on it and pull it out. So this will now need to get bent so that it's like this. So this part will solder onto our setting, and this part will go into our ring. Yeah. So this is my setting for the ring, and this is my jump ring. So that's a 4 millimeter inside diameter jump ring, 1 millimeter wire, and this little wire clip here is also 1 millimeter. Now I'm going to solder these on with easy solder, just so I don't unsolder my claws. So a piece on each spot that you place with your flex brush. And I'm using a fairly decent amount of solder because I want this whole loop to solder quite well. So we're just going to warm this up. Dry out our flux. Push the solder in position. Concentrate the flame on the base. When the solder starts to flow, I'm going to push that down with my solder pick just to make sure I have 100% coverage. I'm just watching the solder. So there it goes. I'm happy with that. So quench the metal, have a really good look. Make sure that you can see the curve of the solder between the two pieces. Pickle it. So come out of the pickle, dry your piece, hallmark it, bend this bit to the proper shape, because you know you're going to plug it into your ring. You know your ring is only 6 millimeters wide, so we can trim this to length. Make it slightly longer, because it's always easier to take metal away than it is to add it. And we're ready to bend our claws over. Now go around your ring with your parallel jaw pliers and turn the claw and so that it's 90 degrees from the base. It'll just make it look nicer when you go to set the stone. Now, I want a nice tight bend, and it's impossible to do that with a pair of pliers. So what I'm going to do is use my bench block, put that face down. I'm going to use my jeweler's hammer and just tap. So I'm lining up the edge of the base, holding it nice and tight. So I'm just tapping that, and I'll have a nice square bend. Yeah, so just keep going around your, and at a certain point you're not going to be able to get a couple of these, and you're going to have to bend it with your pliers. And it's okay, because your parallel jaw pliers do a really good job. So bend it as close as you can to your base. And tidy up the ends of this bit. Clean this a bit more, and then go in the tumbler, and the tumbler will help harden up these claws a bit. But what we really need is for it to harden up the bit that's going to go into our ring. So before you tumble it, sit your stone in place. Take your side cutters, the level part of the back, so the flat part of the back will be touching the stone, and the tip of the stone should touch the high part, and you can see that with that level there's plenty of claw sticking down. So cut your claws at that level all the way around, and they'll be plenty tall to tidy up later and get them the correct length. And basically we're just getting them roughly the right height. So now we can make this all shiny and pretty. Okay, we're out of the tumbler. We can set our stone, and we'll just push the claws over against the stone. And what you can do is just use a bezel rocker. Now you need to be careful because this is sticking down. So I put it on the side of my bench, push the claw over with the bezel rocker, turn it around, do the other side. Now I file all these flat so that they're aesthetically pleasing. And what you can do is, if this isn't right down against the stone, what you can do is take parallel jaw pliers, if they open up enough, and you can just do that, and it'll push the end right down against the stone. So make sure that the stone doesn't wobble around. Make sure that these are nice and snug. And because of our little setting, our little claw setting here, it fits the hinged ring. So this is 1 millimeter wire, and it slips into this 1 millimeter inside chenier. But I also put a jump ring on here so that it could be worn as a pendant, kind of two for the price of one thing. So we'll just slip it on our ring and see what it looks like. And I've got these so that they're at a slightly different angle because we want a friction fit so that it doesn't just fall out. So there you go. And you can see how it fits into the ring.